If we knew more about our sleep, what would we do differently? Would we go to bed at a consistent time or take steps to reduce interruptions to our sleep? With Sleep Score, Apple Watch measures your bedtime consistency, interruptions, and sleep duration. Then, every morning it combines these factors into an easy-to-understand score from 1 to 100. So you'll know how to take the quality of your sleep from okay to very high. Know your sleep score with Apple Watch. iPhone 11 or later required.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice podcast, your inside connection to the outdoor legislation. From the Beltway to policy happening your way, we're covering it all. I'm your host, Fred Bird. Join us as we explore public land access, wildlife and fisheries management, Second Amendment rights, the triumphs that shape our nation, the sports we all love, and the stories that fuel our passion for the great outdoors. This is the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Welcome back, friends, to this featured edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. This week's guest, Mr. David Wielicki, who is a Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation board member. He is also the Chief Executive Officer of the South Carolina Waterfowl Association. Today, we are talking about a couple initiatives that David and his team have going on by way of the Camp Leopold and the Camp Woody programs. And we are talking about education, stewardship for the kids, for mentors. Dave is going to get into the two different camps and what the strategy is there and what their missions are, but in large part, telling our story, telling the conservation story, telling the advantages of getting young people out in the woods and the waterways and what that does and how life-changing that is. For those of us that live this, we kind of know this is kind of baking the cake for us. We get it, but there's a larger story to be told here to people that don't. We talk about the 80% on this show all the time in the middle that we're trying to reach. We got our passionate folks on our side of the house, if you will, that love conservation, get out in the woods and waterways, and we get it. And then there's that dedicated part of our population that will never like what we do, but it's our neighbors. It's our people that don't know, are indifferent, or just maybe anecdotally grew up around sporting families but never got into it themselves. And these stories and what David and his team are doing and their organization are certainly inspirational, at least. But we're going to let him tell that story and get you to where perhaps this is a program that could be emulated in your state, especially if legislative makeup isn't too friendly to instituting hunter ed or a program like that in the school system and introducing that curriculum. Here's a way where private citizens could potentially get that done. So all that introducing out of the way, it's my pleasure to welcome in Mr. David Wielicki. David, thanks so much for carving out the time.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate the opportunity and all the great work that the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation is doing to pass on our outdoor heritage to the next generation. It, to me, is the most impactful organization out there. And just a little background on myself. I'm a Delta waterfowl grad. I have a wildlife management degree from Auburn. I did my master's degree in Canada studying mallards at Delta waterfowl. And then in 1986, or in 85, I came to South Carolina to work for Ted Turner, worked for him for a couple years, and got the idea to start the South Carolina Waterfowl Association, modeling it after California waterfowl. The whole idea was Ducks Unlimited at the time was doing most of their work on the prairies. We wanted to enhance waterfowl and wetland habitat in our state. And I was so blessed in my life. My father and I were best friends. We spent over 2,000 days in the outdoors, hunting and fishing with each other. And my dad was a very successful plant manager for Cutler Hammer and Eaton Corporation. And when I started SCWA, he challenged me. He said, Dave, what matters more, wildlife habitat or people? And of course, as a recently graduated master's degree wildlife biologist, I quickly responded, Dad, it's habitat. We have to have habitat for wildlife. And he looked at me and he said, son, you are wrong. It's people. We must have a strong constituency of people who care about the resource in order to have a future for it. So with that in mind, in 1994, we started our Wildlife Education Center, which we believe is now the nation's largest. We have 3 programs that we operate. We have actually 4 programs. We have a summer camp, which is more R3 related. for introducing kids to hunting and fishing and recreational shooting, trapping. We have about 1,600 kids a year that attend that, a lot of scholarships for those kids that are raised by our local 28 chapters. We also have a school year camp, which I believe is our most important. It's called Camp Leopold, 21 different classes on natural resource conservation. And that's designed to reach the 80% of us who don't hunt and fish, but allow us to do so.
Mhm.
We also do weekend outdoor heritage events where we have parent-child deer hunts, duck hunts, dove hunts on our 1,300-acre campus, and then also on surrounding hunting clubs that help us out. In addition, we have a wildlife management apprentice program, the only one in the country. We train future land managers, and a lot of our campers actually have gone on, graduated from 4 or 5 years at summer camp, gone on to university or to tech schools, and then worked with us, and we then place them in land management jobs, which is an incredible need.
Mm.
About last year, we started what's called our Outdoor Heritage Institute program, and that program is designed to help replicate our education programs. We went to our legislature, Senator Chip Campson, who is a Sportsman's Caucus member, chairman of our Fish, Game, and Forestry Committee in the Senate. Senator Campson introduced the South Carolina Conservation Education Act. I went to Senator Campson. I said, "Look, we've got to work on conservation literacy. We need to get our kids outdoors. We've got to reintroduce young people to the outdoors to benefit their mental and physical health, and to benefit conservation literacy. That's if you look at the root of every problem we have, everything that CSF is involved in when we have a big issue that comes up, it always goes back to a lack of conservation literacy among the public. So we were successful in getting this bill passed in the first year. We had the endorsement of the Congressional Sportsman's Foundation. They worked closely with us on it. And we have a bill that's passed. There's $3 million in the budget this year to provide. Our goal is to provide a 1 to 3 day conservation education camp program for every fourth grader in South Carolina.
Wow.
We have 64,000 fourth graders, uh, and this applies to children in public, private, and homeschool networks. And the money, what it does is it pays the program providers, and it pays for transportation for these kids to go. This year, we hope to reach 16,000 youth, and with that, then we want to grow the program. We're working on signing up schools. We'll have more demand than we have capacity, and then we hope to grow the program over a 4-year period, so we're reaching 64,000 a year.
Mm.
Uh, to be a program provider, the money is administered by our South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. Director Tom Mulliken is a big supporter, uh, as are many of the legislature. This bill passed almost unanimously. So DNR will administer the funds. Those funds will be directly given to program providers and to schools, to the schools to cover transportation, to the program providers to cover the cost of running the camps. So our partners right now are the Clemson Learning Institute with their 4-H camp program, our Wildlife Education Center, and then we're working to bring on more partners who can be providers. Our capacity is about 14,000 kids a year at our facility. Clemson has a large capacity also, and then we're going to bring in other camps and other programs. So one of the conditions to be a provider, you have to have a experience in conservation education. We have our Camp Leopold curriculum that we'll share with providers. You also have to deliver a 30-minute class on the North American model of wildlife conservation. So the whole idea is let's benefit these kids, their mental and physical health, and then let's also teach them about conservation. And you know how it is, Fred. Everyone can remember that time as a kid where they got turned on to the outdoors. And all the science shows that the fourth grade is the best time to get these kids. They're 9 to 10 years old. And we really need to focus on that, get these kids outdoors. There are stunning statistics about the health of our children right now. 20% of our kids are obese, 20% have mental health disorders, and the average child only spends 7 minutes in outside play
That's wild.
and 7 hours looking at a screen.
Mhm.
So, those statistics are what open the eyes of legislators in our state, and we wanna take this model with CSF's leadership and our Outdoor Heritage Institute and start replicating it across the country. We believe we have the only scalable model. You know, there's a lot of great programs out there, but no one has reached scale with this. We've got to reach millions of kids, parents, teachers, in order to make an impact.
I wanna ask you, so a couple of questions came out of that, and I wanna start with getting the buy-in. Now, is this I compare myself sitting up here in the Northeast in New Hampshire to South Carolina, very familiar with the great culture and the appreciation for the sporting and conservation community, and it's really wild the amount of dedication that residents in South Carolina alone give to so many different, conservation nonprofits. Like, you would think it's all the same well everyone's drawing from, and yet there's just so many great niche, organizations that are still able to fundraise and put mission delivery on the ground for their specific missions, and it's incredible. So, with that said, getting legislation passed so that you could have those dedicated funds from the DNR, was that an arduous task, or did you guys get, buy-in right away because that's just kind of part of the South Carolinian experience? Or, talk about that a little bit, and then, I wanna take us somewhere else.
Well, we're very fortunate to have uh, a number of legislators that care about our outdoor heritage. You know,
Mhm,
Senator Campson is very involved in that, and he has a lot of seniority. So he has, you got to have senators and House members that have the buy-in and also have the ability to get the bills passed. Seniority is everything. And one of the scary things to me is you look around the landscape. I'm sure you see it in the Northeast. If you look at the makeup of a lot of legislatures, there are fewer and fewer hunters and anglers,
mhm.
and when we lose that, we're gonna lose our ability to get bills like our Conservation Education Act passed. So we had great support, both bipartisan support from Republicans, from Democrats, and we gathered up. One of the things that we did, we we didn't ask for money the first year. We asked just to pass the act and set up the administrative part of it.
Mhm.
We also brought in a lot of different educators, principals, superintendents, Stephen Lance with the head of Clemson's Learning Institute. We brought in our education experts, and we had also youth who have attended our school year camp, which was initiated in 2012. So we had a lot of great folks that were behind this, and we had all of the scientific data that backs up the benefits, the mental and physical health benefits, but also the cognitive benefits. There's an incredible amount of research that shows how outdoor education benefits youth, their behavior in the classroom, their ability to grasp, children always learn better with hands-on activities.
Mhm.
So it's just it's an overwhelming on many, many levels, there's overwhelming positive science that supports what we're doing. So, and it's something that it's hard for anybody to be against. So we
You
just
you
need to
would
get
think.
organized. Yeah, you would think.
So, and so again, that comes back to, the regional cultures. I mean, I think we all agree. I think, something gets tossed around. There's like 6 sub-countries within the lower 48, right? We have our cultural heritages and tendencies. Now that's kinda changed since, especially since COVID, where you have, movement of populations and people's different motivations from getting out of states like California and New York, and moving to things that are, states that are more hospitable to things like the cultural heritage of sport and conservation. These are things that are important to people, and maybe some, less government overreach. But all that to say that there are some shifts in those population dynamics and makeups for people willing to accept something like this. You guys in South Carolina obviously still have that deep rooted tradition. Conversely, in the Northeast, in the Northwest, because of those changing dynamics, you have people that are less friendly. So if I am, you know, looking to do something. So, case in point, we had an education Hunter Ed bill go through the legislature this year that didn't come out of committee. The language was a little bit more aggressive than we would have liked, and we suggested a softer tone, taking it from shall language to should or may, right? And even that still people around here kind of got, nervous about it. And a lot of it stems from firearms, despite the fact that we said, this doesn't have to happen on campus or in a classroom. But nevertheless, the heart of my point here is the power of the NASC network, the National Assembly Sportsmen's Caucuses for the new listeners. These are legislative sportsmen's caucuses that are set up in all 50 states. And so, what is going on in South Carolina, uh, where you want to emulate this and see this scalable in other states, when people can collaborate across state lines, those co-chairs in South Carolina talk to co-chairs in New Hampshire or in New York or in Iowa to get something like this done where it's already been successful, they can start working together with your folks. And how can we replicate this? We don't normally see that interstate collaboration on other issues. And, folks that have been to our NAS summit, our annual summit at the end of the year, they come out of that and they're like, I wish I'd known about this before and sooner, because the amount of networking and the amount of connections I just had, things I want to do in my state but don't have a starting point, these people have already done it and have been successful. Because of that collaborative effort, we're able to share language, share how you got the process done, and then tweak it to those states. It's so powerful to have an organization like NAS Network being able to work with someone like you who already has this done, then go through the legislative process that you've done with your caucus. Uh, this is how we get things done.
Yeah, and it was very powerful for us to have a time to speak at the NASC summit. We had our DNR director, Tom Mulliken, we had Senator Campson there, and they were able to share with other legislators what the Conservation Education Act is all about. And that's very powerful, and it reinforces what everyone does. I mean, there is no other organization that can help to get this done other than CSF. We have the knowledge of how to deliver the education programs. The model for this, the really good news about this is if we have states that have the money to do it, that have the right legislators that want it done, we don't have to raise money to build outdoor camp facilities or things like that, because there's an incredible network of camps around the country, whether they're Boy Scout camps, whether they are YMCA camps, 4-H camps, and they all share one common challenge. A lot of them have great summer programs, but they are looking for school year programs to help support their great outdoor camp facility, and they are open to doing this type of thing. So the infrastructure already exists. It's a matter of getting the legislation passed. Our Outdoor Heritage Institute program, we will help train. We already have a national conference now where we bring in conservation educators, and we have a 3-day collaboration we do at our Wildlife Education Center. We want to expand that. We want to help train people on the curriculum. If it needs to be modified for their area, that can be done. And then also help them with how the marketing goes. How do you get to the schools? How do you get schools to sign up? And then work with different agencies, departments of natural resource. You've got, like, Arkansas has some great state education areas on their wildlife management areas. So in Arkansas, if this bill were to be introduced, it may involve a lot of their own existing facilities that they have. And it really doesn't matter. It's just, let's get these kids outdoors. Let's open their eyes to the incredible creation that's out there. Nature heals these kids. I'm very passionate about that. And where do we all want to go as sportsmen after you've had a busy week? I want to go to my hunting club and do some work, or I want to go to my grandson's t-ball game. That's also a great
Yeah.
experience. But but,
Well,
but
but not to interrupt, but we laugh about that. But that you talked about the competition for outdoor time with the screens, and as a father of a middle schooler and a high schooler, I can tell you I am competing nonstop with the sports. I love sports. I love my kids being active. There are far worse things, but sports, definitely from when you were a kid and when I was a kid growing up, It was not this intense. It was not this, signing contracts and committing to middle school teams and high school teams. It's just the wildest thing. So I find myself encouraging this because it's huge for the kids, in that totality. But I have to fight with the schedules to get them outside to do the sporting stuff that they're passionate about. So it's this weird double edged sword. Anyway, you said that and it triggered something in my head, and I wanted to put that out there because I know there are other families that feel this way.
I call it over-organized sport.
Yeah,
Um,
that's exactly right.
the, well, and just personal story. I grew up duck hunting every weekend with my dad, and uh, the coach asked me to play basketball. I said, "Well, every Saturday," and I grew up Catholic, so we would hunt all day Saturday,
Yeah.
go to Saturday night mass,
Mhm.
and then hunt on Sunday. And I said, "Well, coach," he goes, "Well, Dave, we only play during the week in practice." So we lost a game very badly on a Friday night. He told the entire team we had to practice Saturday morning. I went duck hunting, of course. On Monday, the coach said, "Dave, you weren't here. Give me 20 laps." I said, "Coach, with all due respect, I'm going to give you my jersey because we had a deal and you broke it."
Yeah. No, weird.
Going duck hunting with my dad. But no, you're exactly right. And it's, sports are great. Getting kids in the outdoors is great. Just, helping them to gain appreciation. If they never hunt or fish or trap, if they just enjoy hiking and enjoy nature, they're going to be supporters of conservation. And that's what we need to do.
Mhm.
There are many programs, that have been tried. They're on a small scale with schools. This is the other interesting thing. There are a lot of schools, the Montessori type method where kids are outside learning with hands-on. We want to promote that type thing with our Outdoor Heritage Institute program as we develop it. We want to, help introduce these kids through the conservation acts in each state. But we really, another stunning statistic, General Walt Boomer, four-star general, assistant commandant of the Marine Corps. General Boomer's 89 years old, sharp as a tack. I met with him a couple weeks ago because he's very interested in this. And he said, "Dave, did you know that in the 1980s, 75 out of 100 18-year-olds who walked through the door to enlist in the military would qualify? Now it's 23%." So we have a real issue, but every crisis creates an opportunity. And I think this this opportunity we have to address the mental and physical health crisis, cognitive development, is something that we've got to act on. And I believe, we may not get this passed in every state, but I think we can get it passed in most states, and we can also maybe have a modification in some of the states that might be a little cautious about it. And I think it it's a foundational problem. I always look at conservation as a square. It's on one corner you've got policy, on one corner you have education, and then you have research and habitat. Well, if you look at the history of the conservation movement, we've spent most of our money on habitat and research, and that's very important. But we've spent far too little on policy and education, and we need to increase that in a big way. Because those are the foundations, right? I mean, without constituents, without the great policy work that CSF does, uh, we're going to lose. I can hear my dad. I can still hear him. Without that constituency, all is lost, and we got to get to work on that in a serious way.
You look at basic PE, physical education, high school, middle school gym classes. And when people start going through line items on their budget and they start looking to trim fat so they can uh, fund another pet project within curriculum or within the school system, oftentimes that physical education gets cut dramatically or gone altogether, and they qualify or satisfy a requirement by way of private sports, or they get a waiver or something. Which, to your point, going back to the fourth graders and the statistics and the backing of those stats and through science, that that's the best age demo to get these kids involved. Just like those recreational sports, is to give the kids a chance, get them outside. And when you start taking away these opportunities, it makes it even more challenging. And we, as a community, are already challenged with what 2026 looks like and acceptance and understanding, which gets to your policy point, which I'll hit in a second here. But my point on this comment is just give the kids a chance. I think about we were feral growing up in the 80s and the 90s. Like it's that standard street light comes on, you come home. Did you drank from a water hose when you got thirsty? There was no carrying water bottles around. You're on your bikes. You're in the woods making forts and maybe starting a fire too. You probably shouldn't have had for a campfire, but nevertheless, we were out there doing it. And kids inherently want to get dirty. They want to jump in swamps and catch bullfrogs and collect tadpoles and buckets and go catch brim and sunfish on their own. It's empowering. I remember the first time I went fishing by myself and my buddies. My dad wasn't there, and we're catching fish. I was like, yeah, we're doing it, man. We don't need dad to be here, although it's great when he is. So giving them the opportunity alone would allow that. Now, I argue, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I've always maintained, based on my experience, ninth grade, at freshman year in high school, is where I really started cognitively retaining a lot. Maybe I'm a little slower than some, but for me, that was like the impressionable start of retaining information, finding value in it, and making it applicable to life, like why it makes sense. It wasn't, learning stuff in elementary school, the inner ear anatomy, right? Why that all works together. It was just a project. So my thing here is physical science classes typically start somewhere in that freshman sophomore year, and the exposure to how wildlife management and wildlife management funding works is something we are incredibly deficient in. Even our own community, we're deficient. I would argue that the great majority, probably more than 80% of sportsmen, hunters especially, do not know or understand Pittman Robinson and how that system works. I would like to see physical science when they do cover the, ecological curriculum and how habitats work and balanced ecosystems work, that somehow some exposure gets in there into the curriculum. Like this is how it works in nature's circle of life, but because we are fragmented, there are 8 billion people on this planet. It's not this Lion King, Disney understanding of circle of life. The circle of life only works because of the American System of Conservation funding, insofar as the small group pays for the public benefit. Kids that get that and understand, again, we both agree we're not going to recruit every kid to come in and buy a hunting license, but the fact that they know it and start understanding how this all works changes the calculus on this going forward, especially when we're looking to pass policy.
Yeah, I think that's very important, adding education modules at different ages. And I think, the reason we picked the 4th grade is because you're if every outdoors person looks back, you're intrigued by nature as a young child. If you can be exposed in a great way, and I always argue, let's get these kids immersed in a 3-day camp program where they're spending the night. There's no phones, there's no TV. You're immersed in the outdoors. You're getting dirty. You're doing all these fun classes. You're holding, we've got a waterfowl aviary at our facility. We have alligators, we got ducks, we got turtles, we got snakes, and you're getting these kids immersed in it, and it's amazing what it does. I mean, it changes their life, and if you can just pique that interest, then they'll take it and run with it. But I totally agree with you. When once, in the ninth grade or 10th grade, that should be part of our curriculum so that people understand how the North American model of wildlife conservation works, who funds it. The other interesting thing when we do these camp programs, we have a lot of parent chaperones and teachers that come. There are thousands of them. And you're also educating them at the same time. And when you start to explain the science behind all this management, it's very hard for someone, even if they've never hunted or fished or they have a perception about it, it's hard for them to dispute that.
Right.
And most of them, Thomas Jefferson, one of his greatest fears for our nation was when we were no longer an agrarian society and people no longer learned what they learn on a farm. And you think about it, it's something I do with my grandkids. I did it with my kids. My all of my kid, my a son and a daughter. My son's a fishing guide. But he's a conservation minded fishing guide. When he takes people on the water, he's teaching them about the resource. My daughter is a nurse practitioner. She's got 3 kids, and she hunts, she fishes. Her husband hunts, my daughter-in-law hunts and fishes, and we're immersing our grandkids in that now, to where they're out there, they're working the habitat, they're learning about the habitat, about the animals. So, and they just thrive in it. You just see it, and I want every kid to have that opportunity. A lot of schools, there's a lot more schools can do also. Like if we can pique the child's interest with this program, and then through our Outdoor Heritage Institute program, start promoting, having education days at a local state park for these kids,
Mhm.
getting these kids in nature. They can learn a lot of STEM concepts while they're outdoors. They learn it faster. And we have a lot of teachers tell us, we have some schools, they want their kids to come in late August, early September at the start of the school year. And what they tell us is when these kids spend 3 days out here, they get to know each other, they build a bond with each other, the teamwork improves, and their entire school year is much better than it would have been otherwise. So, uh, it's the thought of strapping my 2 grandsons in a chair in a school without recess, without outdoor play, is a recipe for disaster
Disaster. Yes, that's
and mental
exactly
health
right.
problem.
Yeah.
It's not good.
I think there's and again, I'm no scientist or doctor, but I think just life experience has shown me that a lot of kids are misdiagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and it's they got energy. They need to blow off steam. It's like a furnace, man. You can't build and just expect them to sit like little robots, little AI robots for 8 hours and get a half an hour lunch and snack. I think that's wildly unacceptable, and we're doing our future leaders and our future caretakers a great disservice by expecting that. I think we've gotten somewhat better on it, but they're not outside enough.
Yeah,
You mentioned. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, you just hit on something really important. What we're doing here is we're investing in future citizens,
Mhm.
right? In healthy citizens that are gonna be more productive citizens that are gonna make this country a better place, and that's the real issue, and you just hit on that, so
Yeah, we
very
need
important.
we need them to pick up the mantle. Look, we've already seen. You and I know these studies and see these stats that the baby boomer generation is aging out, and especially the latter. They are biology is going to catch up with all of us. Death is batting 1,000. So we can't escape that. Our physical limits are based on how we took care of ourselves, I think, over time and what medicine's out there. So there's a lot of folks that are age class that are aging out that can't go out and participate anymore. Are they mentoring people? Are those people being replaced? Stats tell us no. Um, so it's not a priority. Late Gen Xers, early Gen Xers, of which I find myself in, it is precipitously falling off. I think you have more adult emergent hunters than you have legacy hunters by way of granddad, uncle, father teaching them. And then, right now with the late millennials, the early rather millennials that are older, these are more people that have just had an interest in maybe senior year or most of them in college of like, I want to do this, but I don't know how. I don't have the resources. I don't have mentors. I didn't come from a hunting family. So getting them with this program, what you guys are doing and the goal setting that you've laid out, and hopefully the allowing of this model to be implemented in some variation across the country. Uh, again, to your last point, with shaping leaders and continuing this is without being hyperbolic, and I don't think it is incredibly important because without it, without the buy-in, without the acceptance, what does fish and game, wildlife management look like? What do the state agencies look like? How do you have a population that's not buying hunting and fishing license get that 3 to 1 on average match from Pittman Robinson through sport fish restoration if no one's picking up fishing poles and buying boats? How do you do it? They're trying to solve that problem now. You have states like New Hampshire where none of our funds come from the general fund, but when we offer something and ask for a little bit of the general fund, we get our hands slapped and say, "No, you can't touch that general fund. We're not contributing to it." And then at the same point, they'll look at the state agency, be like, "Well, you're so much in the red. I don't know how you're going to survive." Well, yeah, no kidding. How are we going to survive if we're not investing in R3 and the younger generations? Because if my generation, the ones above me, don't replace us, fish and game management's gonna look a hell of a lot different, in 20 years than it does now.
It is, and, there's another great program, the CAP Alliance Conservation Awareness Program that Bruce Tatterchuck and Justin Grider have worked on. You've got Club Ovis and the Conklin Foundation, and you have other groups that have, the state of Alabama started funding people through Pittman Robertson, where they would raise the 25% and then put people in the field going into classrooms. And we're part of that initiative too. We reach about 25,000 kids in the classroom too, where we actually go in with animals and introduce conservation principles and talk about the North American model of conservation funding. And this whole thing can work together where where the legislation can help fund getting people into the schools through the agencies, reaching the kids, and then also making them aware about, okay, here's a program where you can actually immerse them in the outdoors, which we have to. Just being in the classroom isn't enough. We have to get kids outdoors. I mean, I think there's a statistic about 5th graders. I think only less than 5% of the 5th graders in our country have had an overnight outdoor camping experience in nature. These kids they're afraid of nature. I mean, think about that.
They are, I take it a step further, they are afraid of, um, their peers. You s and I lived through it, so I guess I can speak from my personal observations. COVID screwed up an entire generation of kids. Now, there was an older generation that missed out on, late high school events, graduation, all that, but you talk about this demographic, 4th grade, 5th grade. My kids went through it, and I see them with the technology. As much as I try to separate from them, it is part of life, unfortunately. Um, they have a hard time communicating face to face. My daughter just applied, for her first real job because now she can work summer camp, and having to coach her through how you talk to somebody, inquiring about a job, having that this sound come out of your mouth and you're actually talking to someone. It's not all through text. Hey, I want a job. How to fill out a resume, how to fill out a job application. That, oh yes, you have to have a follow up conversation. These kids don't get any of that. So like, to go to a 3-day overnight camp is mind-blowing to these kids. I'm going into a place where I know nobody. They're all so very insecure, whether they wanna admit it or not. It's not natural for them of this age class to do this stuff. What is natural is thumb pounding out a message, and that's their relationship, and it's completely contradictory to the human, experience, and I'm not a psychologist, I don't know the why, but I know that being dirty and being in the water and being in the trees, like you're saying, is the antidote for most of this.
We do surveys of campers and ask them, what's your favorite part of camp? And you'll see this oftentimes with many of the young girls. And some of the replies that we get, and we get this one, on a regular basis. My favorite part was I was disconnected from social media. Didn't have to respond to any people, and I could truly enjoy nature and being with my friends. And then you'd have other comments like, I've been going to school with so and so for the last 4 years, and now I think I really know them.
Mhm.
Just that bonding and social skills. I was speaking with a past vice chairman of the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts had 10 million scouts in the 80s or in the 70s. They're down to less than a million. Um, they've had issues and problems. They're trying to get that going, but
Mm.
just the value of getting kids in the outdoors, and there are other programs working on it. But I'm just very excited, Fred. That you guys are just the most impactful organization on policy, and we're trying to fill that niche on the education side for conservation. And together we're going to get some great things done with this.
Yeah, no doubt, and, certainly appreciate those sentiments. Uh, Leaving off on your last thought before we check out of here, I think about when I take people turkey hunting, adults, kids, otherwise, and I always say to them at the end of the hunt, successful or not, that you and I are now bonded forever. I will always be a part of your history. We Especially when you are filling a tag, you become instant friends. Most of the time, we're already becoming friends before we sit down at a tree or in a blind, but yeah, it's just getting to know somebody instantly. I could have gone to 10 conferences, seen the same face, and never got it. But as soon as you spend time in the dirt or time in a boat, that relationship immediately changes, and you get to know another human being in a whole different way of intimacy that you'd never do on your own. I think. Um, One last thing I wanted to come back to, I put a pin in. You mentioned in your programs that a lot of the parents, mentors come and join the kids and learn alongside. Um, in the last, not quite 10 years, but within the last decade, there was a study that was put out. I'm sure you're aware of it, that found that the mother was the glue that kept kids, through R3 going. If mom was involved and went out fishing and went out hunting, most of the time the kids would come out too, and that would continue. Dad, granddad, it was kind of again one of these baked in the cake generational things. But if mom was involved, that was it. That was the common denominator to keep these kids going. So hopefully, a lot of the moms are coming to the courses and setting up their kids for success because with their buy-in, that drives everything.
We do have that. We have a lot of moms that come out. We have, women's weekends that we run, but, having the whole family, in my experience, my mother supported it. She didn't go out a lot with us, but she was in full support of us spending time together in the outdoors, and, and you think about also one of the most important things, you as a young child learns so many social skills. If you've got my daughter loves to hunt. I had her around different older people when on different hunts. My son, the same thing, but they learn how to communicate. They learn, how to become an adult, by watching others, and it's very powerful. Just that time together in the outdoors, and it's, you know, we're missing that with a lot of kids. A lot of kids.
No doubt. David, fascinating conversation. Definitely could keep going, but out of respect for your time and our time limits I put on us, we're gonna put a bow on it there. Definitely look forward to hearing more from you. Certainly, glad we'll see you at the NASC summit here in Oklahoma this later this year in December. But yeah, continued success. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your leadership with CSF and being a board member and being able to spot inspire other people and be a resource for legislators across the country that would have an interest in doing something like this. So um, again, continued success, and we'll look for some follow up as well.
Thank you, Fred. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about these important issues.
You bet. All right, we'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.